Today I'm joined with Kristy Evans, who's very kindly agreed to come over and chat to us about her career. And I have a feeling this is going to be an exceptional podcast today. Kristy, thanks so much for coming over.
Thank you for having me.
Can you tell us, what do you do?
Such a good question. I do a little bit of a few things, but I have a coaching program that helps people understand how they can apply who they are to their work and feel more aligned in what they're doing.
Can you tell us, how did you get into coaching people and helping them align themselves with their work and so on?
So I never was aiming to be a coach. I wasn't trying to be a coach. I never even really knew kind of what the term coach was. And I actually don't really consider myself a coach because I work with people in groups and I create a lot of content, a lot of teaching content. So I sort of think of myself more as a teacher than a coach, to be honest. But the program, I coach people through my program. So there is a bit of coaching, but I don't really define myself as a coach. So I wasn't really setting out to be a coach. I actually was a human behavior researcher for 15 years. So I used ethnography, which is a tool that anthropologists use to study people. And I did that for big organizations, big nonprofits, governments.
Wait, what's that tool?
Sorry?
What's that tool? Ethnography?
Oh, ethnography.
Yeah.
So ethnography is when you learn about people by immersing yourself in their environment. So that means I would have to be in the field and I would go to people's homes and I would hang out with them in different areas and places in their community based on what I was studying. And so I would do field studies around the world with people in different countries.
Wow, so you get to know them on a very deep personal level.
Yeah, you see like all the inside. You know, it's kind of like that thing. People love to look in people's cupboards or like know what's happening in their house. And I can say that I've really looked in a lot of cupboards, a lot of people's homes in the world.
Wow, that's quite a job.
Yeah, so it's quite a job, yeah. And it's a bit strange because it really is strangers and they really do just like open the door and let you in.
But what's that like going into someone else's house and kind of looking in their cupboards? Maybe you're asking them personal questions.
Yes, I'm
as well.
asking them personal questions as well, yeah. It's super fascinating. It creates this lens on the world that you just cannot imagine because it's a really interesting sort of role to have because it's not something kind of anybody else would do. So if you think about like the types of people that might come in and explore or talk to people, it might be like a journalist or it might be somebody that has like an agenda. You might be talking to like a therapist or something like that. But right. I'm there with sort of no agenda. Nothing they say is ever going to be anywhere. I'm never going to see them again. So they're not really putting on a show for me, if that makes sense.
But there's got to be a level of trust that you build very, very quickly, right? Because I can imagine like a lot of people might not be overly happy with just come in. Would you like to come into my home and analyze me?
Yeah. Well, I will say they have signed up for this, so they know that I'm coming. They're not, caught off guard. I'm not just like going door to door. So they have signed up for it, so they know I'm coming. But yes, there is a whole process of building rapport at the beginning to sort of build the trust where people feel comfortable opening up to you. And some people are not super open, and it's a very hard job in that sense because you never know what you're going to get when you get in there. And half the time it doesn't go well, to be honest.
Oh, really?
Yeah, half the time you really can't, you can't get a lot out of somebody or they're not fully open, which is why when you're doing research, you have to do loads and loads and loads of research.
It's kind of ironic if they've signed up to speak to someone like you and invite them in that they might not be open to it as well. What do you think is going on there?
Yeah, it's not necessarily they're trying to not be open. It's just... It's a very bizarre scenario to be in. If you think about it, like people are not super used to having random people ask them questions about themselves. And nobody's quite sure how comfortable they're going to be in that scenario or situation. So it can, and some people are just naturally not really open and
sure. Yeah. So, there's lots of different reasons for that.
Lots of different types of people, I suppose.
And the day you catch them on or the moment, whatever happened at work, all that sort of normal life sort of stuff happens.
Yeah.
Can I ask you, do you find through that experience that anything has been really useful in terms of building rapport and getting trust with a total stranger in their house? Do you have any tips for somebody who finds it maybe difficult to build rapport?
Yes, I have. Over the years, I definitely built quite a back pocket of tools because I also worked in many, many countries. So, I could in 1 month be in India and the next month be in Africa or in Brazil or something like that, right? So the cultural difference is quite vast. And obviously, like I have to start out by not only not knowing anything about these individuals, but also not being like fully up to speed on whatever cultural norms I'm walking into as well. So there are a few tools. I'm trying to think if they're like relevant in like a general public context. But one thing I would say is like you immediately have to and part of the training of doing ethnography is you're always trying to make it about the other person and not yourself, right? So when you're asking questions or you're doing something, you're not doing it from your own perspective, or you're trying to not do it from your own perspective. And well, this will come. I'll explain this a bit more because it does connect to my program and why I created my program. But when you go into those scenarios, you can't just talk in the way that you would talk to somebody if you're going to a dinner party, like, "Hey man, how's it going?" Like this isn't how like as an objective party you walk into somebody's house. Most of us are trying to build rapport by being similar to the other person.
Yeah, right, which is tricky, right? Because you're a professional in that case, but you're also trying to be personal, and there's kind of a
exactly. So I'll never ever say anything about myself. So I'm never going to say, "Oh, my dad has that kettle at his house too." Right. So there's never ever anything about me. It's always about them. It's always like a question about them. Like, "Oh, that's an interesting kettle. Like, where did it look so old? Do you have that for many years or something?" You know what I mean? So the question is about them. I'm not trying to make them comfortable by me trying to be similar to them, if that makes sense. Right. Which is what most of us do when in our kind of general
And
life.
Is that a professional choice, or do you find
that? No, that's like a specific type of training.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So to be honest, people would probably be able to build rapport better if that is how they interacted with people, because it's very much about the other person. It's not about you.
But why can't you do that?
Why can't?
Why can't you say, "I've got the same kettle as you. I've got the same."
Because you're not there to make friends with somebody, right? So you're there to fully be like an observational observer.
Okay.
So I'm not there to like open them up to ask questions.
Gotcha.
To me, if
So
that makes sense.
you're trying to be objective, or you're trying to be professional, a little bit objective, but also build trust. You're kind of walking a line a little bit.
It's quite a line.
Yeah. Okay. Very interesting.
Because they have to like you. So the best way to make somebody like you is usually just to be curious. So the more curious you are, and the more engaged and interested you are in them, the more they tend to like you. So if they like you enough, they'll open up a little bit. But it doesn't require you telling them about yourself, if that makes sense.
Right, makes total sense. And what are you trying to figure out? What sort of questions? What are you trying to understand when you're?
Well, every study is different. So it depends on what I'm studying at the time. Like if I'm, there might be something specific related to, it depends on who the client is and who I'm working for. But I've done studies on friendship. I've done studies on sustainability. I've done studies on relationships, on finances, whatever. So there is always a topic. I'm kind of wanting to explore that topic in the context of their life, if that makes sense.
Right. So it's across the board, all types of topics. Well, so friendships, family, jobs.
Yeah, like all lifestyle kind of stuff. Yeah.
Is there anything that really stood out to you as a key? Obviously, you can't share any personal information, but is there any key learning that you thought was really astonishing from all the studies that you did?
Well, I guess this kind of connects to my program. So one of the things is I've done studies in like almost 40 countries now, and that's well over 10,000 hours of like sitting in people's homes in a lot of places with a lot of kind of cultural difference and cultural nuance. And the thing that I always found so fascinating about that experience is how hyper specific people are, and how unaware they are of their own kind of nuance and specificity in terms of like, we kind of have this idea that like, we're all humans, we're all the same, we all kind of have the same makeup. And there is some truth to that in terms of, we have the same kind of biological needs, and we probably have the same emotional needs. But we also all have this like really, really insane level of specificity in terms of like who we are, what shaped us into being who we are, how we express that And what I found most of the time doing these types of interviews or being in these places is that when people are a little bit like, why are you here? What are you doing here? At the beginning. And at the end, they're like, well, would you like to come back anytime soon? And I'm like, no, I'm never coming back here. That's not how research works,
Wow.
But I was always curious about that at the beginning. Like, why do people like this so much? It's so bizarre. Like, who would even want to? When I think about myself, I'm like, would I sign up to have some random stranger come to my house? Like, that's so weird. Why would they like this so much?
But they're the star of the show for like, an hour or two, whatever. How long would it be generally?
Yeah, it would be long. So sometimes 3 or 4 hours.
3 or 4 hours. So start, you've got somebody giving you full attention for a couple of hours. Maybe it's self-reflective as well. Like when you're asking so many questions, maybe they're reflecting on their own actions and behaviors and habits and so on.
Yeah. Well, I think what I realized is that, people could go to therapy or something like that, right? Very important, especially for specific mental health issues. But a lot of people are really nervous about something like therapy, or it feels like judgment, or it feels like, I have to go do this hard work or whatever. And so there isn't really like another outlet where you explore yourself and really like understand yourself. And you really can't do it with friends and people like that. People think they talk to their friends about themselves or about stuff, but you don't. You sit there going, oh, my dad has a kettle like that. Like that's how we're trained to interact with people who are in our life. That's how we interact with people in our family. Rarely do people actually sit down with like intense curiosity and go, well, no, what's that about? Where does that come from? And so you really don't have an opportunity ever to reflect in that kind of way where there's not this maybe therapeutic barrier that feels like, I'm here for work, if that makes sense, or I'm here to uncover something, whatever, really deep and scary. And
so this type of thought process, is that something you try to incorporate into your program and into your coaching or your teaching, the self-reflective, to understand the specific nature of your need or your values, I should say?
Yeah. So the other thing related to the research is that because I'm exploring a lot of different cultures, and there's a specific, way that I'm trained to interact with people and to try to be as objective as possible. Which is why I don't talk about myself. I'm not there to talk about myself. But you can't ultimately be objective, right? Like there's no way to ultimately be objective. You're still exploring the world through your own lens, obviously. And part of the reason I do studies in so many countries is because over time you build up comparison points, and then you can start to be more objective because you can start to recognize really tiny little nuances in culture when you really have a broad base of comparison. To be able to say like, oh, that tiny thing there, like nobody else does that, like, or that type of language, like I've never seen that before. So that's part of the reason I would build up a lot of different like studies in a lot of different cultures, but ultimately you still, even after that, can't be ultimately objective. And so the other thing that we use as researchers are what are called projective techniques. And these are ways that you can explore people without asking direct questions. So the other reason why people really enjoyed the experience, or why they found themselves able to reflect in a way that they're not able to reflect, is because most people who might be asking them questions are going to be asking them direct questions. They're going to be like, Ronan, tell me about your past. Or Ronan, why do you like this shirt? And you, Ronan, you don't know why you like that shirt. You think you know why you like that shirt, but you don't know. So you might come up with an answer.
So I've got an answer.
I really like blue and red.
I've got an answer rehearsed. Is that what you mean?
Well,
versus...
you'll just come up with something to be pleasing to me,
right?
Basically. So, and you don't actually know. You'll kind of rationalize or make something up. You don't know you're making it up. You're just, being. That's how we're trained to.
You're being polite. You're being friendly,
yeah.
Right?
Oh, I always wear blue. Yeah. And so being not from these cultures, I can't go in and ask direct questions because people will tell me answers that I can't pick apart. I can't get beneath those answers. So in certain cultures, I would use primarily projective techniques. Keep in mind, there's a lot of translation involved as well. So in some places, we're not speaking English. So there's translators and...
So what's a projective technique?
So I'll explain what a projective technique is. I'll give you an example. So I'm doing a study in Uganda. And, I was doing a study in a lot of different African countries. And so I want to ask them about their culture, their nationality. Like that's kind of what I'm studying, like the kind of core values associated with their nationality. And so if I were to ask somebody directly, like, tell me about your nationality, you know, as an Irish person, we like beer, like you start telling me about, I don't know, your holidays, your core holidays that
St.
matter.
Patrick's Day, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, we've got this. Irish people are like this,
So we'll go to stereotypes, or we'll go to
So you'll go
stock
to whatever
answers.
reference points
Right.
that you have already associated with your culture, basically. So what I do is this is an example of how I would do those studies, is I would get a bunch of, this is 2015, so, Instagram is new. So I would go on Instagram and I would get a bunch of images from local people, wherever I was going. And I would just put a bunch of images out on the table. And I would say, this is if I had a group of people, so maybe there were like 4 people. So you guys are going to create a story out of these images, and there's going to be a beginning, middle, end. There's going to be characters. They're going to do something at the beginning, something's going to happen in the middle, and then something's going to happen in the end. And I want to see what references they attach to all the images that I've put there, right? So they're crafting their stories, and they're imagining that this is the obvious story that everybody would craft. So, well, this guy, then he made money, then he got this meal, and then this is all his friends hanging out, and and they get to the end, and they have to present the story back to me, like once they've constructed their story.
As a group?
As a group, yeah. And so I do this in many groups and then in many countries, right? So for me, when I'm seeing them construct the story, I'm seeing that, like, after I've done this many, many times in one country, it's always about status. It's always, the food always represents this. The people always represent this. I go to another country and it's like the food is always the ending point. It's never in the middle of the story, if that makes sense. And so what happens at the end is I'll get their analysis of the story, and I'll get them to tell me how their culture is being expressed through the story. But do you see how that's so different from me saying, tell me about your culture? They'd be like, oh, let me tell this outsider about our holidays. So we've got the national flag. We're very proud of this flag.
Yeah, it's a totally open question, and they're really bringing it. You're not imposing any.
They're not able to think. They don't know what I'm asking. I'm
Right.
just saying, make a story. They don't even know that I'm interested in nationality, for instance, or culture. So because of that, they're not able to then rationalize an answer, like me saying, why do you like that blue shirt? Or why are you wearing that shirt? Right? So then at the end, I can tell them, like, oh, do you guys want to know a little bit about kind of some of the patterns in your stories versus some of the ones in Nigeria? For instance, they did the same study in Nigeria. And they're like, oh yeah, that is true. They're like, oh, I wouldn't really know that. And so there's many techniques like this that we can use individually as well. But I'm not, the point is I'm not ever asking a direct question. So I'm not saying, so what do you like? What do you like to do? And maybe they'll tell me their hobbies or something, but I'll have with a projective, I'll have a back entrance way into that question. And then I can ask them, oh, that's interesting because I've never heard this, or you said this, and what do you think that is? I can ask them to rationalize at the end if I want that or if I need that, but that's not the starting point, if that makes sense.
Right.
So
when they rationalize afterwards, are you getting the quality answers then, as opposed to at the start when you say, oh, why are you wearing the shirt, or why are you eating the food? Does it make more sense at the end when they?
It makes more sense to them.
Right. Okay.
No, often they're like, oh, so this is what happens at the end. They're like, oh, I'd never thought about this. I guess that is true. I didn't know that was or I didn't know that was specific to me, or I didn't know, I've just never reflected in that way,
Right, okay.
And so, yeah, so when I was building my program, I was like, oh, that's interesting, because when it comes to not just careers, but career or work being something that's, I think, one of the big 3, right? It's like work, relationships, health. It's like, what else is there?
Yeah.
Right. So with that being such a cornerstone of people's lives, and granted, it's not a cornerstone of people's lives in every culture, by the way. But even if work as a job is not a cornerstone of their culture, their sort of craft or their expression of themselves is. And so with that being such a core aspect of what helps a person feel empowered or feel agency or feel a sense of meaning and purpose. I was always interested in how in a kind of career or work context, people are so clueless about like, what makes me unique? Like, what's my superpower? Like, I don't know who I am. And it's like, where are you going to go for that? The therapist? Like, no, that's where you go to explore your trauma or anything that's blocked you or held you back, like emotionally from like reaching your highest potential. And I just couldn't get over the level of like confusion about that. Like the confusion between like what my job is and work and like who I am, what makes me like specifically me, what specific kind of like intelligence or genius do I have to express and share in the world. And because it's so rooted through this lens of work of like, what job am I going to get? It creates an additional block or filter for people to actually see who they are and like what makes them unique or relevant in the world. And what they can like actually contribute through their sort of nuance and specificity of who they are. And so, yeah, like that kind of gap I was always interested in because I'm like, I don't know how people are going to really explore that because you're not taught that in school. And then it's like, get a job. And then it's like, why is everybody unhappy in their job at a certain point, right? It's like, because our jobs are not an outlet for us to actually express who we are. And we don't actually know who we are. So how would our job be an expression of who we are, right? And then you get so caught up in the like, but I need to make money. And so there has to be like some way to bridge like really understanding not just like who you are, but how who you are is some kind of tangible form of value you have to contribute to the world. And there is a bridge from getting to that to like, how do I support myself and make money? But if you can't even understand this in the first place, you're just sitting around looking at job boards all day. Like, what would make me more fulfilled? What would make me more fulfilled? And constantly not finding the
tough questions, right?
yeah. Constantly not finding the thing that's going to make you more fulfilled, you know? So when I built my program, I built it based off using projective techniques to help people uncover the different layers within them.
Very good. So would you have an example of one of the projective techniques to help people understand their skills, their value, their personal attributes and so on?
Yeah. Okay, so here's one of the things. So the ones that I use in my program, this is not one that's specifically in my program, but it's the type of thing I do with people, is the thing with projectives is that you're never asking a direct question. So to give people an example of then how do you get into what you're trying to figure it out? So when I say try to help people understand that why they get confused is because people are asking them direct questions. What's your goal? What's your vision?
What's your 5-year plan?
What's your 5-year plan?
Oh no. People are like, I don't know what my 5-year plan is.
What's your purpose? What's your why? What's your passion? And then every single person is just like, I don't have a why, I don't have a passion, I don't have a, you know. Mm-hmm. And so a really, really basic example of this is like, instead of ever asking somebody like, what's your vision? What's your purpose? What do you want? What's your list? Whatever all the versions of that are trying to get you to define what you want. I do the opposite of that. So I'm like, let's go through everything you hate. Mm-hmm. So let's go through all the people at your company that you hate, that you don't want to be. Mm-hmm. Like Bob, like curmudgeon, hates his life.
Yeah.
Let's list all the characters of Bob that you do not want to be, that like your worst scenario in life is becoming Bob. Let's list Patty. Don't want to become Patty either.
Okay.
Let's list let's list the worst version of all of the tasks that you've done at work.
Right. So you're collecting a lot of away from values or away from desires.
Yeah. So I want you to know what you don't want in order to know what you want. Right. So I don't want to start with, what do you want? Mm-hmm. You know, like, what would be better than this? What's your ideal? What's your vision? Right. So what I know that you'll know is what you don't want. What I know that you won't know is what you do want. So you'll be on a trajectory to get to what you do want, but you're not going to be super clear on it, right? Like, so that's an example of like, not necessarily in my program, but just a way to describe to people how like, I'm never going to use a direct question because you're not going to get into the back door of what the truth is. You know?
Right. So you start off by getting a lot of those away from or what you don't want, you know, getting a inventory of all those type of things. Mm-hmm. And then what's next? Like if someone's thinking, okay, how do I find out what my mission is or what my purpose is? Or
okay, so what's the opposite of Bob? So Bob's a curmudgeon. Bob. Let's as a very specific example. Bob spends no time with his kids. He sees his kids once a week or something. So what's the opposite of that, or like why does that? What would be a version of what Bob's life would look like that wouldn't be that? So as an example for me, when I was doing my research, I used to work with. We worked many hours. Imagine we're like traveling all over the world all the time. And this woman I worked with, who was my boss at the time, I remember one day she came in and she was like, "Oh, it's just such an early morning, you know." And I'm like, "Oh, why? Like I just got here at 9:30." And she's like, "Oh, I have to get up at 5:30 to do reading homework with my daughter. We have to do reading from 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. because she's too tired when I get home." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I'm not becoming you. Like
wow.
that. This is not going to be. No. This is not going to be my life." So I'm like, "Oh, okay. If that's like what would be the opposite of that? Like what would be the ideal? Like my ideal, I don't have kids, but if I had kids, my ideal would be like I'm not doing reading homework at 6 a.m. Like I would be getting home at 3 after school to do reading homework. You know,
so really thinking of the bigger picture, the whole work-life balance, or the person's entire lifestyle.
Yeah, I mean, that's an example of a person. I would also do the same thing with like the tasks and things that you're doing. So, you know, also for me at the time, I was in a lot of countries for many weeks at a time, very unbalanced lifestyle to be sitting in Nigeria for 3 weeks, like, you know. So I also had to be like, okay, what are the aspects of this that I really like? Like what I like is like I could spend literally 24 hours with these people, hanging out in their house, talking to them. Like it's the most fascinating experience ever. But like sitting by myself in this country for 3 weeks is like, is this going to be long term?
So you like the nature of the work itself, but like speaking to people.
So it's like speaking to people, and what is it that I like speaking to people? What is it that I'm really getting out of speaking to people?
But it was the environment that you didn't like, which was being in a country you didn't know for long periods of time, maybe not having camaraderie around you.
Yeah, I would say not just the environment. I think the environment, the lifestyle is not conducive to like the long term. Basically, like that amount of travel is not. But I would say no. It was more the impact of my work was the bigger issue, right? So I'm having this experience where I'm learning all of this stuff about people. I have this like very broad data set in my head across all these countries of all these people, and I have like a real understanding of like the layers. Like I have at a certain point, I have such a specific set of tools to really not only to like get in to people and to get to kind of underneath like who they are and what makes them tick, but I also have like structures and frameworks I've built to like understand the different layers of them. Because the thing with humans is the other thing that makes humans interesting is that they're like very, very layered, right? This is the other reason why we can't understand ourselves. We're like, so what's my job? What's my whatever? But we're actually made up of these like very, very distinct layers that are all interconnected. This is why my program is called the Genius Stack, because it's a stack of layers basically. But we're made up of layers, right? We can't see the layers because I'm Ronan, career coach, wearing my blue and red shirt.
Yep.
Like it's like you might get into some psychological layers related to like your past and trauma or triggers or something like that. You might understand that from doing therapy or doing some other types of modalities, but you rarely will ever get into like, but what are the like individual layers that make up who I am?
Yeah, now I really want to know.
Yeah, exactly.
What are the individual layers that make us up?
Well, you'd have to do my program.
Okay.
But so the point is that I had this framework of people, right? Because when I'm studying them, like I want to know like the base foundational layer, I want to know the next layers, whatever. But in terms of like how my work or my research is being used, it's you know, collecting dust on a shelf somewhere of whoever sponsored the study, you know, so it's not being used in the world. So it was a big kind of, like if I was doing my what I don't want list, it's like, I don't want all this work to go to waste, you know. It's like a really unique kind of set of insight about people, and it can be used in a much more kind of meaningful way.
Right. So that purpose behind your work is really important to you.
Yeah.
And how do you help other people? Because I noticed that in your on your website or some of your materials, you talk about purpose and mission quite a lot. How do you help people identify that, but also match it with the real job market that's out there as well, right? That's the tricky one.
Yeah. So in the layers, like in my stack, the top one is kind of what I call motivation or purpose. I don't think of purpose as a thing you have. I think of purpose in the sense that I think of humans, all of us just operating in an ecosystem with the plants and the animals and everybody else. And within the ecosystem, we all have a role and we're all here to play the role. And if we weren't, the bacteria wouldn't be here if it wasn't playing its role in the ecosystem. And I think it's the same for humans as well. So when I think about purpose, like what's your purpose? Your purpose is just to become more in alignment with yourself and contribute that to the wider ecosystem. And that's you playing your role, And so I think people think about purpose as like, what's my purpose? Like, I'm going to change the world or I'm going to do that, and that's way too big for people.
Like it's too lofty a place to start.
It's too lofty. And also it's like people are looking for a specific target, like the way they're looking for a job. What's my next job? What's my next purpose? Like a purpose doesn't have a job description. Like you're not going to be able to like identify it on the internet, if that makes sense.
Right.
But if you really understand the layers of yourself, what makes you like authentically you, you'll understand very specifically what your role is in the wider ecosystem. And so that's the top layer of the stack, but it's not about like, identifying your purpose or mission statement or something. It's about understanding how like your temperament, your personality, your unique set of intelligences and how they stack up. It's about the skills that you've developed, the strengths you've turned into skills. It's about the very specific experiences that you've had in your life that have shaped and trained your perspective or point of view. And it's related to the very specific obstacles or struggles you've had. And when you stack all of those things up together, then you know all of, like, you'll see how specific your story is. It's like, if you just took a personality test, you would be like, oh, there's only 16 of these. So there's only 16 types of people, But if you really understood like your temperament mixed with your intelligence, mixed with your strengths, mixed with your skills, mixed with your experiences, mixed with your obstacles and struggles, and you see, and it gets more specific to you as you go up, if that makes sense, you'll understand that it's like the bacteria. It's like you have a tiny little specific thing to do in the world.
Right.
It's not like you're going to make a rocket and go to Mars.
And do you find people find that like once you're teaching them through those steps, do they then do they get it? Is it easy, or do some people find it still a struggle to say, well, what are my, okay, yeah, we're talking about strengths or we're talking about skills, we're talking about my personal attributes. Do they still find it hard to, let's say, label those experiences and to articulate them?
If I was asking them direct questions, yes, they would. But I'm not asking them direct questions. So if I was saying like, okay, here's the strengths, which ones are yours? Then yeah, nobody can answer that, right? Because they're just thinking about it in terms of, well, like at my job, let's see, I do project management. I write briefs. I don't see that on the strengths list, So yeah, if I was asking them direct questions, like they would struggle with that. But because I'm not asking direct questions and because I'm taking them through exercises and a process to, it's almost like to like subconsciously access that. That's what projectives are, is you're accessing like subconsciously what people's experiences are. They just don't know that's what their experiences are because we don't know what we subconsciously think or feel until we access it. But once you access it, it's like, oh yeah, like, and like temperament and the intelligences and all that, they're all present before age 21. So you can just do a bunch of, like, I don't have people look at their job at all for those types of things.
Right.
Whereas most people are like looking at their job. That's why I say people are like, okay, so I have project management skills and skills, whatever. And you're like, yeah, that's like this much of what your actual stack is. Right. Your actual stack is going to be mostly repressed, to be honest, because most of us are, it's mostly, we limit it or repress it because we're trying to fit ourselves in a job market. We've been taught to try to fit ourselves in a job market. And the second you really understand like the real value of what you have, you're not looking at yourself through the lens of like, how can I get a job in this?
Right,
if that makes sense. Yeah.
Right. How can I get more of the same, maybe?
Yeah.
So that's cool. So once they get their genius stack and once they get their stack, then what's the next step? How do they kind of say, okay, now I know who I am, I know what I've got to offer?
Well, so this is the other thing that's a little bit specific to my program as well, is that there's not, it's ironic because people do end up getting new jobs, or they do end up finding a new direction. And they start kind of plotting their course to that. And there is a section like at the end of the program about, your next steps and how you're going to evolve into your next steps or whatever. But my perspective on kind of work and career is that it's the long game, and there are 3 phases to career development that I always talk about, and those phases are each 7 years long. So, and for each of and people don't believe that until I show them my data on the top performers in. Most of my data is American at the moment, going global soon.
Right.
But the top performers in every industry in the US, let's say. So I can map those 3 phases on all of them, from Elon to Oprah to Taylor Swift to whoever. So it's like the top people in their field.
What are the 3 phases?
It's it would take another whole podcast.
Oh, okay.
I have videos on it you can watch.
Okay.
But the idea is to get people to understand you're not making a decision for like the rest of your life now. Like, there's a training and development phase, there's a value and depth phase, there's an expansion and impact phase, and every single person has to go through those phases. So your goal is to like really understand, and in each of those phases there's different kind of tasks and steps and things that you're doing. And that middle phase is usually when people want to expand into something beyond where they currently are. The first phase is much more about training and development, like building skills, and you need to do a lot of data collection and understanding kind of like where you fit, what you like, what's happening. That's, mostly people's 20s, kind of early 30s. The second phase is usually where people want to expand into their higher potential, and they feel really stuck. Like, shoot, I just built all these skills in this particular thing. It's going to be like, I'm going to push up against a limit in this thing, and I want to expand further, but now I have responsibilities and bills, and I make money at this thing. So how can I take the leap into something that's more fulfilling, kind of my wider potential? And so in that phase, like, you really have to unblock all of the aspects of your stack that are repressed. So if the whole first phase you've just been focusing on the job market and being in the job market and getting a job and aligning yourself with a specific job, in the second phase you really have to understand like all of the different types of intelligences you have not been using in that job, that are innate to you, that are probably either blocked or repressed, or not valued in society, not valued in culture, and you're gonna have to start developing those. And so to give you an example of this, there was somebody in my program who was a consultant, had a job in a consulting firm, and again, very successful, very could pay all the bills, all the things, but like really running up against like, I'm obviously not going to be fulfilled in this long term. I like aspects of it, but it's definitely not using my full potential. But also, what else am I going to do? And through the program, actually, one of the things that came out is within his like stack of intelligences, he has what I call like a very, very strong somatic intelligence, body-based intelligence. And there's an aspect of, I have this like classified in the program, but there's an aspect of interpersonal intelligence that's related to somatic, related to body. It has to do with touch and intimacy. So often like healers that use their hands, right, have this intelligence, right? But you wouldn't know about it if you haven't ever used it. So if you've been in consulting your whole life, you're certainly not using that, right? But in the program, like, we kind of uncover that he has this kind of, that very specific intelligence. He has, there's an aspect of kind of art and aesthetic intelligence he has, et cetera. These things are obviously not expressed in the consulting world. So,
wait, how did he find us?
Through the projective technique.
Ah, very good, very good.
So these things are all present. They're not like, oh my God, shock and awe. Right? These things are all present in the exact same way in the culture example I'm giving you. It's not like these people are like, oh my God, you just told me about my culture.
Yeah.
It's just that they're like, you subconsciously can't access it subconsciously. You're only able to access what's conscious, right? So if the world has taught you need to get a job, you need to make money, you need to have status, you need to have security, you need to have whatever, you're like, who gives a shit that I have a somatic, that was there all the way in childhood for sure. It's there in your personal life somewhere, which is why the projectives are not related to work specifically. And so that's all there. It's not that it's not there. It's just that you're like, I need a job, I need training, I need skills, right? So you're just not like using that.
It's almost tunnel vision.
It's like tunnel vision. Yeah, we've been trained to have the tunnel vision on. What I say is like there's three reasons why our intelligences are repressed. One is tests. So tests only, like our scalable tests, meaning tests to get into university and standardized tests that are used in schools, they only test verbal, linguistic, and logical mathematics, right? That's only 2. On the intelligence list, there's 15, right? So that's like 15 areas where you might have different levels of intelligence that are never going to be valued starting at age 11, 12. The second reason is because we're incentivized to fit ourselves into transactional roles. So a transactional role is a consultant. And the third is because we're incentivized to do what our culture values. So if our culture values doctors or engineers or entrepreneurs, like we're incentivized to fit in and experience belonging by being one of those things. Right. We don't get belonging by being like, I have a somatic energy healing touch, That's not something that gets you, status and belonging when you're 21.
Yeah.
You know, so we're incentivized to repress these things or not use them, right? So when he uncovers some of these things, the short story is that he's now a sex therapist.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, and he uses only some of his body-based intelligence now, and some of his interpersonal-based intelligence now. And he did a long transition out of consulting. So it's not like he, quit consulting that day. In fact, he stayed in consulting for another 2 years after the program. But because he'd uncovered it, it's like the same thing that happens to people in the interviews. Like once they experience it, they're not lacking fulfillment anymore because they're like, oh, I get it. Like this is why I'm not fulfilled here.
Right.
And like I know what I want to pursue now. Like I just want to pursue understanding these aspects of myself that have been like repressed or left out or hidden. And so, he is not crushing it financially yet, right? But he like knows what he wants to build. And so that's why I say like, it's not about like getting a new job. It's like, that's what happens in that 7-year period. If like you're going to make a big transition, it's going to be a staged transition. So you're going to like, he stayed in that job for 2 years. He made and saved a lot of money in those last 2 years to kind of fund himself to do something else. And it wasn't about him having a vision or a new mission or a new job or a new whatever. It was about understanding himself, like what he innately had to share with the world that he wasn't sharing with the world he wasn't able to express. He
wasn't aware of
work.
First, right?
And so he'll be able to build, this isn't like something he knew was a job, right? Like how would he know that was a job? He spent those 2 years still in the consulting world, like meeting with people, understanding how he did some other trainings and stuff in the type of somatic work or somatic therapy he does.
Very good. That's quite a shift.
It's quite a shift.
I've never come across that role myself.
Yeah,
I've never
said a few
to him.
times. Sorry for the sorry that's your testimonial.
Yeah. Well.
It's not, but I like it as a testimonial because it really shows that like it really shows I think for some people maybe they just need like a different consulting job, right? Like they just need a consulting job with better hours and a better boss, and that's totally fine as well. That's absolutely fine. But I think and that's probably what he was looking for when he came to me, right? But that's like the level of how much we potentially have to contribute in a way that like really fulfills us, that we would just be totally oblivious to,
Well, it's a fantastic case study. Well done for being able to guide him on that journey and allow him to get that super result. I'm sure he's delighted now. It's a very interesting field of work that he's found himself in. But could I ask, so when people understand what they've got to offer, they understand their value and their intrinsic nature and so on, what do you think is the biggest thing they struggle with after that, from the people you've interviewed and the people you've spoken with and the people you teach?
Yeah, the biggest struggle for everyone is, but how am I going to make money? But how am I going to make money? Like, how am I going to make money? Like, but I need to make this much money and this much, I have these bills, da da da.
Right. So the commercialization is challenging.
Yeah, and I would say that it's really about understanding that it's a phased transition if you want to do something else that's potentially going to make less money or more money or whatever it is. And for me, like in that phase also, like I did have to change my lifestyle and I did have to make sacrifices to shift into what I was doing. I was always making a lot more money as a researcher than when I first started my program. And so I did have to move to cheaper cities and live in a cheaper way in order to pursue that for a long time. And some people are prepared to do that and some people are not. And there have been other people in my program that are not prepared to do that, for instance. And they want to move from like marketing at one company to marketing in another company. And that's like enough of a kind of shift for them where they can like maintain the same kind of salary and that kind of
lifestyle
stuff.
And so on.
Yeah. And so everybody has to figure out kind of what's right for them and when it's right for them to make shifts and transitions. But when it comes to the money thing, it's really like everything else, I think, related to for the same reason that like our kind of authentic nature is repressed into this like, what's my job? How am I going to make money? The reason we can't see that is the same reason we're obsessed with money, right? So we're also down the same path of like, and I must have a house and I must buy it here and I must do this and whatever. And there are a billion ways now to restructure or change a lifestyle to align it to who you are and how you want to contribute to the world. And for the last 4 years, I was traveling full time before I settled recently. And I'd say, everybody I met on the road is restructuring or changing their life in different ways. And everybody's, that's possible for people. They just don't know it's possible for them. They don't know kind of how to go about it or, what to do. But it's partly because of that like tunnel vision of like, that this is how life has to be. This is what we have to do. These are the steps we have to take. This is the timeline we have to take them on, et cetera.
Right. So they have a set of limiting beliefs, right? Very firm limiting beliefs that this is how you make money. This is the timeline. Yeah. This is when I need to live in a certain place.
Yeah.
Is that something that you tackle with people as well?
Well, I think for that, the only thing you can do is see other people doing.
So get references outside.
Yeah. So that's part of the reason I make the case studies I make of like the icons, because I want to show people actually that I want to show people that Taylor Swift also had to make a stage transition. Like people have this idea that, she all of a sudden became this like huge pop star or something. And so like in the case study of her, where I'm showing her in the middle phase, I'm showing that she had to make a 4-year transition from country music to pop music. And in order to do that, she had to build bridges from country music into pop music. She couldn't just make the leap. She wasn't accepted in the new world. Like nobody in pop music, in fact, everybody in pop music wanted her to stay in country music. And so every person, even like the top icons in whatever industry we would consider them icons in, has to make a stage transition. And to do that, like you have to look around and see other people who have done interesting things and just start thinking, oh, what if I could do that too, And so so that's like the icon series, but I also have like kind of everyday people who have made transitions because because you have to understand that like, oh, this person did this, oh, this person did this, oh, this person did this. When we're in the tunnel vision, like if you're at the consulting company with consultants, you're only around consultants doing like must have house, must have this, must have that. So you have to get out of that world. You don't have to leave to get out. You just have to go to the internet.
Yeah, it's a case of what you see is not all there is.
Yes,
right.
Exactly.
So I think that's a great tip. Excuse me. So to get additional references so that you understand all the different possibilities and variations that there are to change your career, to reshape your lifestyle if it's not working for you.
Yeah.
I came across your title on your website and I was really interested.
What was it?
So your title is Career Innovation Strategist.
Oh, that's on mine.
And I thought, why does she have such a fun title? And I just call myself a career coach. Career Innovation strategist sounds so much more exciting.
I knew you were going to pick up on that part. I was like, he's going to notice the career innovation strategist.
You got to talk me through it.
Okay, I will talk you through it because let's start from. So I am a researcher, right? But the purpose of the research I'm doing typically is for companies that are wanting to innovate. So they're wanting to either create new products, they're wanting to buy a company in a different country or something that they don't know about, and they're wanting to adapt products in that market to someone else, or if they're like an NGO or a government agency or something, they have some program they want to communicate in this country or whatever, right? So like this is part of the reason I'm doing the research.
Right, so it's qualitative resech for companies or NGOs or governmental organizations.
Yeah, so there's like two frames of how I think. Like one is the like understanding people frame, because that's what I'm there to do. That's like my core skill. That's my core kind of background, is like spending time with people in their homes and learning about them and kind of picking apart the layers that make them up. And then the other side of me is that like when I'm not in the homes, I'm with somebody trying to think about how they adapt and expand into new markets. With either new products, new offers, new messaging, new whatever.
Yeah, that's where the innovation comes in.
There's where the innovation comes in. So to me, the idea of like us as people, when we think about our work or our career or whatever, to me, all we're doing is innovating ourselves. So, and it's kind of the same process as how you think about how like a company innovates, is like they have to go back to their kind of core foundational aspects that like make up who they are. And then they have to find new ways to adapt that to new opportunities, to new markets, to new audiences. And to me, that's all we're doing in our career as well, is like, we're getting back to the fundamentals. Like, let's take my case study example. We're getting back to the fundamentals of like who we are. So in his core nature, he has this kind of somatic intelligence, right? All he's doing is kind of he's got these skills. He's built a lot of skills working in consulting, right? So he actually has a lot of skills related to like connecting with clients and influencing clients and taking clients on a journey, communicating with them, right? Yeah. So he's built a lot of skills in consulting. His core intelligence is his somatic intelligence, right? But and there's a way that I layer intelligence that's a bit more nuanced than just saying he has somatic intelligence. But so let's pretend he's built out his intelligence related to this with the somatic part at the base. All he's doing is taking kind of his authentic nature, who he is specifically, that core intelligence, that somatic intelligence, the experiences and obstacles he struggled with in his life. So imagine this particular person has a specific range of struggles, that every person has some kind of struggles as well. He's specifically designed to help people with those struggles. That's why he had those struggles in the first place. So there's even a specific audience he can help related to this somatic thing that he does. And then he's just taking these skills that he has from consulting and he's applying them or adapting them to this new audience of people who might need his somatic intelligence, right? And that even if he was getting a job like at another consulting company, like I had another client who, like, she just went in a marketing company from one, like a tech company, and then she went into marketing for kind of like a childhood development type company. So just switch companies, but same role. And her stack and her intelligence is much more related to kind of childhood development. So she's now just doing marketing, but for this company that's much more aligned with kind of her stack. So all she's doing is taking what she has here, but also with the tech company, and applying it to this childhood development company. So she's just taking her base and like innovating it for a new market, if that makes sense. So to me, we have to do that constantly throughout our career. Even if we find a new role, we still have to find a new way to adapt ourselves and apply ourselves, even internally in that role with a new team, new manager, new whatever. And so when I think about it, I don't think about it as like helping people find a job. I think about it as like helping them innovate their career path. You know? Very
good. I love the approach that you're using your background in qualitative research and using all the data and identifying trends, and then the innovation that you would have when you go to a company, and then you're just kind of looking at people as their own service, but on a very human level, which I think is a really nice way to look at it, and tapping into their core values and all that sort of good stuff. Can I ask you, do you, and I always love asking coaches this, because sometimes I meet coaches personally or I meet them as clients. Do you coach yourself?
I do. I did. I mean, I built the whole program based on myself first.
You were the first client.
I was the first client. / these other ones that I've talked about were early on in the process as well. But yeah, I mean, I really, really strongly believe like people should, there's nothing in your career path that you should throw away ever. And I get this from being in the innovation world. And what I always say is a business would never look at their past as a liability. They would never look at their past and be like, I hate that. I don't want to do that. That's crap. Like, I want to do something completely different. Let's throw the whole past away. People will do that. People look at their past as a liability. Like, I hated that job. I hated that career. I hated that university degree I got, whatever. Like, toss it out. Let's start again. Let's get a new degree. Let's do something else, right? A business would never, ever do that. A business is like, look at all these assets we have. Now, how are we going to repackage these assets up into something that can be used in another way? And that's, of course, like, I'm the primary example of that, which you just pointed out, which is like, I'm not throwing away my research. I'm not like, that can be the most like meaningless work in the world, but there's incredible value in that. Like, I'm not throwing away my innovation stuff. There's incredible value in that. Like, I'm not throwing away like all of the things.
Your love of working with people and understanding them, right?
And a lot of people would say, most of the people that come to me, no, I hate consulting. Like, somebody came to me like, no, I do ad sales. It's the dumbest job in the world. I hate it. I'm never doing it. And I'm like, no. Like, I'll show you all the parts of ad sales that are like the most relevant thing you can do. Like, I would have said that about research as well. I would have been like, this is not transferable at all. I'm sitting in the homes of people. like there is no other version of this. Like, I need to throw the whole thing away, right? So the first thing is like, I'm my own example of that, where I'm like, no, if you give me 20 minutes, like, I will tell you everything that's the most valuable thing you've ever heard of related to ad sales or project management or whatever job you think is like the worst job or worst career of all. And I'll also show you how it specifically trained you specifically for something that you need to do in the world, which is like this ex-therapist. Like, he's going, I hate consulting. I'm never doing this. Da, da, da. And I'm like, I'll break down every part of consulting that's going to make you the best sex therapist in the world, you know? And so people can't see that themselves. I get that. It's really hard to like see that yourself. But that was the first thing I did for myself, is I'm like, okay, I'm not throwing away everything. Like, I'm going to figure out how to adapt everything based on what I like, what I don't like what is actually meaningful to me. And then the second part was, I'm like, I got to figure out these layers.
Right?
Yeah.
Open up that program.
Yeah. So I had these layers from my studies, obviously. I had many versions of them. And so, yeah, over the years of building my program, like, it took me 7 years, the whole second phase. That's the other thing, is like, I mean, other than the money thing, the only other problem people have is being like, so what am I, like, when is this happening?
Impatience.
So I'm going to be in my purpose and fully fulfilled and like living full meaning, like, after our 3 sessions, right?
Right. Yeah, good
and
luck.
like, so it took me 7 years to build my program. And by the way, it took Taylor Swift 7 years as well. And Elon and Oprah. Like, so what I would constantly tell myself, because I would also struggle with not being patient. I would tell myself, oh, Kristy, so you think you're going to do it faster than Oprah and Elon and Taylor? And like, you're the one that's going to go faster. Yeah. Congratulations.
The special
you're
one.
Amazing. So I had to have even that mapped out for myself to be like, oh, like, there's going to be this step and then this step and then this step. Like, I'm not doing this overnight kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so in those 7 years, yeah, I did all of the layers on myself. It's hard to accept that, like, the process of doing the layers is not, you're not getting to the end immediately.
Right.
So that was hard for me too, but yeah. So
we're impatient folks these days, right? We want everything instantly delivered to the door,
yes,
or immediately downloadable.
Yeah.
So is that something you find yourself encouraging or negotiating with clients for? Okay, let's have a bit of patience and make sure we get this right.
So I don't think you can convince people to have patience, right? Like, if that worked, I don't know, people wouldn't be feeling unfulfilled and wishing they were a millionaire and stuff, right? By being like, just be patient, you know?
Yeah.
So this is why I built out the pattern that I have in my data around all of the icons and how long it took, because I can't get anybody to be patient unless I'm like, here's the system, you're here. What I started to find was, so when I first had that, people would tell me, oh no, like, you can't tell people it's going to take a long time. Like nobody wants to hear that. And I'm like, oh, I can tell people it takes that long when I show them how it took Elon that long.
Right.
You know what I mean? I'm like, yeah, if I was like, Joe down the street took this long, yes, people aren't buying that. But I'm like, oh, let me show you where Elon is here. Let me show you where Oprah is here. Let me show you where, you know.
So you reframe their expectations to go over a longer period of time. Do you find when you show them what the steps are involved, that they can kind of visualize it a bit more? Maybe it's easier to digest, or is it still?
What I found was, at first I was nervous to do it because people did tell me like, oh no, you can't tell people it takes a long time. You have to sell people a transformation, you know. And I'm like, well, I've done a billion programs. I've never gotten a full transformation at the end of any program.
Right.
And I've done every modality. I've done I've been around the world doing all of the things you can do, you know. Right. And I never got an immediate transformation. Like, spoiler.
Right.
But they all build on themselves, right? Like they all give you one more insight and one more thing. And so when I first was going to tell people that, I'm like, oh, this is like, yeah, this is very against what you're taught in like marketing 101, you know. It's like and people do still have a hard time kind of understanding like what's the outcome? What am I getting from this? You know? And so that it is a little bit tough. But what I found was the first time I started telling people about it, people have so much anxiety and like frustration about like where I am and where I should be, and like I'm not making progress, and I'm going to be stuck in this forever, and like if I get out of this, like I should be somewhere within a year, kind of thing. That when I started mapping out the thing, I also always say it's because then people's first question is, oh, so now that I know what the thing is, I can just like leapfrog it, right? I can just beat it to the end, right? The like human brain is so funny like that. And so what I noticed is when I mapped it out, people would get much more relaxed of like, oh, like I'm not supposed to be like a millionaire.
Okay, so reduces
9 months.
Reduces the anxiety or reduces the concern.
And I'm like, this is what you should be doing. Like in the first phase of the middle phase, the first phase, all you're doing is uncovering the latent intelligences you have, right? It's like once that guy realizes he has this somatic intelligence, he's like, well, I better go explore this, right? So he's out there doing trainings, doing research, talking to his friends about it. And they're like, yeah, mate, like what are you talking about? Like you do this, you do this, you do this. And it's like, he's like, oh, you know, that was probably like a year of just exploring it, but he's having like the time of his life. Like he's just had this new discovery, you know?
Yeah, plus if he's enjoying the process,
he's enjoying
because he loves what he's doing, like, does it really matter if it takes him long? But if you're enjoying the process the whole time.
Yeah, and then from that process, he's like, oh yeah, I'm not going to be like a full professional in this next year, and like I'm not going to be a millionaire in 2 years, you know. It's like he had a better idea. And then when I can show him on the map, I'm like, okay, this is you when you're uncovering this is what Taylor Swift is experiencing here, you know. Then it's like, oh, okay, like I'm in the right zone, like I'm not off track. Like most people are so scared they're off track, you know. They get a bit more calm about it, you know. And they don't have this expectation of like, and I think that the kind of like online world has really kind of propelled this idea that like you're gonna have results in 18 months and you're gonna be like making $1 million online, or you're gonna be whatever you're gonna be doing, and almost nobody can do that.
Right. There's a lot of talk about like finding passion or finding your passion, right? And you know, it's online a lot. I think Steve Jobs was one of the first people to talk about it, and then the search really blew up online. Everyone was talking about finding their passion. So you know, but often when we talk about it, we're talking about like the really cool stuff, like being a musician, being a sports star, being you know, let's say an app creator or a business innovator. What do you think about that trend of people following their passion or trying to find their passion?
Yeah. I mean, it's part of why I created my program, because people were coming to me going, what's my passion? What's my purpose? What's my superpower? And like, I was like, maybe I should go ask. Maybe people do know this, you know, like I did a bit of research on it, because one of the things I was doing while I was building my program, the whole 7 years, I was still, I wasn't working for a consulting company, but I was freelancing to like fund myself. So I was still doing research. So I had an audience to ask people questions. So let me just drop in a few extra questions here. So I'm like, maybe I should ask people. Maybe people do know the answers to these questions, you know? And I even did a study with some like top executives, and I was like, what's your superpower? Like, do top executives know their superpower? And they'd be like, well, it's, you know, I really can lead people, you know? And you'd be like, doesn't every executive need to lead people? Like, I'm like, are you sure?
So even they weren't super clear on...
Even they're not super clear. They have an idea of like what they're good at in a job role, you know? So they can't think outside their job role though, you know, if they've been in that industry for 20 years or something. So I'm like, I don't think these people know like who they authentically are, like what their actual kind of like what all aspects of themselves are that can be like contributed to the world.
When someone finds, like, let's say your previous client who finds out he's a somatic healer, maybe he's gone into sex therapy and so on. When they find out this, if they have their core needs of, let's say, providing for their family or their mortgage or whatever it might be, if they need to meet those as well, in your opinion, is it more a case of, look, just get, it's going to take time, have a side income, build it up, or is it more a case of, okay, well, maybe you need to stay in your existing job and do this part-time, or how do you navigate those tricky waters, right?
Yeah. So I guess this is kind of related to the passion question. So my belief is that we don't have a passion. We feel passion, or we feel energy as an emotion when we feel in total alignment with ourselves and we feel like we are contributing ourselves in our most authentic version and way in the world. And that can be through our work or not. So if you need to keep your job in consulting or something, you like, and this is what I found with the sex therapist. He all of a sudden didn't care about consulting once he was out there studying like sex therapy, right? All of a sudden he's like totally fine showing up for his consulting meetings, whatever, right? Because he now really understands what his true kind of alignment is. He is exploring it. He's building it. He's growing it. He's sharing it with people. And, he was sharing it with like one person a month, right? Like he's not, he doesn't have like a booking of clients or something like that. Now he's all of a sudden like not that worried about being at meetings on Monday mornings, right? Now in the long term, is he going to stay in consulting the rest of his life? No, because as he's building himself in this other direction, he's, you can really see him growing and coming alive in a way where like he starts attracting people to that. Not at the beginning at all, right? But so he's still not a full-time sex therapist, right? But he's now doing freelancing in other capacities.
Okay, so he's figuring out a way to make it a viable option.
Exactly. And that was the same for me when I was building my program. I was still freelancing for many, many years, and I would freelance for a few months, and then I'd work on my thing for a few months and freelance for a few months. So everybody that finds something has to build a bridge, basically, like it's not, and which is why I build out my case studies of like icons. They all had to build bridges as well. So yeah, I mean, in terms of like thinking you're going to find your passion and then like jump into it, it's like, you don't have a passion. Like you have an authentic nature that desperately wants to be expressed in its most authentic form in the world. And that can be expressed through work, it can be expressed through something else. It can be, it just can't be completely tamped down and hidden and repressed. And like, and because we're at work, 12 hours a day or whatever, we're at work, if you're in consulting, not if you're in anything else, but then, where would you see or experience that? You wouldn't see or experience it anyway.
And you're too tired.
You're too tired.
You're too tired and burnt
anyway.
out from all the consulting that you're doing. If someone's listening to this and they want to find or they want to tap into that authentic nature, as you so eloquently put, they want to tap into that. Where do they start? Is it get out the piece of paper and pen and start writing, or do they need to go for a long walk and do some reflection? Like if someone wants to start immediately, what do you advise?
Well, first, I think you should look for other people that you're drawn to or interested in. That can be on Instagram, it could be on YouTube, it could be in your neighborhood, it could be wherever. Like I think you have to find people that you're actually drawn to or inspired by.
Right. Some role models. Essentially.
Yeah.
Maybe even books if you're old school, right?
Books if you're old school, some authors maybe. But one of the things I want to tell people about that is if you're really drawn to somebody, and I recommend getting like a broad range of people. So not like 12 influencers on Instagram that are the exact same business influencer. They need to be like a very broad range in terms of like what they're doing, how they're sharing themselves, whatever. If there's anything that you're drawn to in them, and you're really drawn to, like, you really like these people, like you like everything they say, you really like their mood, their tone, their vibe, whatever it is. And this can be like people in your company as well, right? Like there's, I had quite a few like managers or people like that were, maybe I didn't work with all the time, or clients. I had a few clients that were like this as well, where I would think, God, I really love that client. Like if I were to stay in this world, like I would want to like work for that guy, you know? So find those people, and anything that you're super drawn to in them, they're just reflecting back to you what's in you. So you're not drawn to somebody that doesn't have something that's in you that you want to express.
Right.
So if you look at like somebody like an influencer or somebody that you really like, you don't have to go out and like try to be like, who am I? Just find an example of somebody that you're drawn to. Feel the feelings of being drawn to them. Like, oh, why do I like that person so much? What is it that they're doing that I like? And specifically, what are the characteristics that they're sharing? What are the types of values they seem to be aligned with? That'll be very easy online, because there's going to be these people you really are like, not me, I don't want to be like that. And then there's people that you're like, oh, anytime that a video comes by of her, like I want to stop and look at it, you know? And so they're just mirrors for you. They're just showing you aspects of yourself that you want to express that you're not currently expressing.
Right.
So those types of things are easier than like journal about who you are, you know?
Yeah.
And I'd say the same. The other fun one to do related to that is characters in series or TV shows or books. Yeah. Again, this is like one of those ones you're like, no, I'm just, this is a funny one for me. So you think like, I just like a series. Like, no, I just love Peaky Blinders, you know? Like I thought this, I'm like, no, I just love a gangster movie, you know, or show, you know? And so I was doing this for myself. I'm like, okay, what are all the shows that I've really, and I was doing it for series, what are all the shows that I've like really been drawn to in the last 5 years or something? Like, I love these shows. If you love a show that much, there's a character in that show that is representing core aspects of yourself that you like about yourself.
Right. That's true. That's true.
So I'm like, why do I like Peaky Blinders? I don't want to be a gangster. Like, this can't be real. This can't be thing, you know?
That would be a tough career change.
It's a tough career change. And so I'm like, okay, what isn't I like about Tommy Shelby? You know? And I'm like going through all the characteristics of him, you know? I'm like, well, there's a lot of contradiction in him, you know?
Decisive, probably. Right?
And I was like, okay, what is it that I really like about Tommy Shelby? You know? And I was like, well, first of all, I like the contradiction. Like, I like when you can't decide people are one way or another.
Right. And
so I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And then I'm like, oh, I just like somebody who doesn't want to do it the way that it's supposed to be done, you know? And you could go through like many other characteristics. An
alternative perspective, right?
Yeah. You could go through many other characteristics, right?
And that's what you're bringing to your program, right? An alternative perspective.
And then you're like, oh, how interesting. Like, I don't want to be like a standard coach. Like, I don't want to be a...
Yeah.
Like, that's interesting. Like,
very cool.
Oh, I like contradiction in people. That's interesting.
Wow. There's some deep dive questions that you've asked yourself.
All you have to do is like go watch TV shows and you can learn about yourself. I mean, that sounds really dumb, but it's like these types of things are like people enjoy these versus like, and then write your values down. You know what I mean?
I love the way you've coached yourself through the medium of this show. What's the show called again?
Peaky Blinders.
Yeah, I love the way you've coached yourself through Peaky Blinders. I've never watched Peaky Blinders. I hear it's fantastic. So tell me, if somebody wants to find out more about you, about your program, if they want to follow you, not in the weird way, but in the way we follow people online, what do you suggest?
You can follow me on Instagram. My company is called Silly Sapiens, so at Silly Sapiens, and on YouTube at Silly Sapiens. It's a little yellow smiley face is the icon, and on there is where I put the case studies also of the leaders going through the thing, and I explain the 3 kind of phases of career development. And eventually I'll have some of the tools associated with the layers as well. That right now is in my community, but my community, and you can find the link to my community in the YouTube videos and on Instagram as well.
Okay, super.
Yeah.
Kristy, thanks so much for giving us all your tips, ideas, suggestions, and your alternative approach to finding your authentic self and making the big career change.
Thanks, Ronan. I like your blue and red shirt.
Good on you. Well done.